Shattered Pieces by Orpheus Kidwell, Chapter 27, White Fang HQ, Bell Branch. Stepping through Haku's mirror into his old home, Naruto couldn't help the strange mix of disappointment and happiness welling inside of him. Deep in Remnant's wasteland of misery and grim was where the White Fang made their headquarters. The outside of the capital of the Four Kingdoms was the frontier. This was where settlements were made. Outside, when the frontier was an area known as the Great Lands, for its constant struggle between being claimed as kingdom and grim territory. Outside, even that was the Blight, a place that few huntsmen dared tread, and where Grim made their homes. The Blight was the perfect place for groups like the White Fang and wandering tribes to live, assuming they could keep the onslaught from either finding or consuming them. The White Fang had opted for a combination of the two. The base itself was built into the cliffside, making it difficult to reach for anything. But Flying Grim but Flying Grim and a few species adept at climbing. Even then, the main entrance was via a strange mechanism in the cliff itself, and was much too small for anything dangerous to get through. The entire building was constructed of steel reinforced with protective spells, fueled by the most defensive capable dust. It was forged by specialists whose semblance were uniquely suited for such a task as well. Apparently, the public in Menagerie was extremely reliable as a source of support for such things, according to Adam. Thank you, Haku. I'll contact you when I'm ready for pickup. He explained to the boy as they stood atop the roof. With a nod, he disappeared back into his mirror, leaving Naruto and his group alone. Accompanying him this time was only Shikamaru and Kimimaru. Neil was once more pulled away by Roman, who had business in Vale to attend to. Hidon was still watching over Argent. Luckily, the two seemed to get along somehow despite their initial meeting. Hopefully, Cinder won't be present here, Kimimaru commented idly as Naruto approached the entryway. The three of them stood on an area of the cliff that jutted out slightly, but enough for them to comfortably stand on without risk of falling. Embedded into the stone itself was what appeared to be a large metal hatch one and a half times the height of Hidan in its diameter. When Naruto approached it, the horizontal green light was emitted from a scanner above the hatch. Next to the scanner was a pair of diodes, one red and one green. The green one lit up after the device was satisfied with the blonde's identity. It would be troublesome if we had to deal with her any more, Shikamaru readily agreed. As the hatch swung open and they walked inside, more troublesome than this trip already will be, he corrected himself as they were greeted by a small group of masked White Fang pointing automatic weapons at them upon their entrance. Naruto's eyes shifted to a menacing red as he regarded those before him. Now, is that any way to greet one of the White Fang's captains? Kurama wondered while focusing the pressure of his aura on the gunmen before him. A couple of them were unlucky enough to faint from the immense sense of distress such a thing caused. Another few immediately started vomiting. Oh, maybe that was a little too much. Guns down, idiots! One of them finally exclaimed. That's Adam's little brother. Sorry about that, Kurama. We know how zealous our recruits can be. Someone appearing as human as you without their mask. It just threw them off. Red turned back to blue as Naruto pulled his aura inward, trying to discern the identity of the man before him. Naruto smiled. It's no big deal, Lieutenant Gray, the blonde greeted. Or perhaps I should just call you Edward now, given the circumstances. I'm just so used to being formal to members in their masks. Lieutenant Gray was a rather large man, both in height and muscle. His black hair was swept back behind his mask, which was slit to show only red eyes beneath, with tribal markings of the same color coming down from the slits. His uniform was sleeveless, showing a pair of large arms, one of which was covered in tattoos that weren't dissimilar to the markings on Adam's mask. Strapped to his back, and what really helped Naruto identify him was a large chainsaw sword that was unique to him amongst the entire branch. Is my Nissan in right now? He's in the office, Naruto. The blonde nodded thankfully and looked around a bit conspicuously before lowering his voice. And what of Her Highness? Lieutenant Gray grimaced a bit but shook his head. This was pretty good timing then. We just had to deal with her during Vale's siege of Mount Glen, Several hours is more than I thought I could handle of her. Edward nodded in understanding. No one in the White Fang enjoyed her company. but she was strong enough to make even Adam submissive. We'll be on our way then. Eddie, I've got official business to take care of with Nissan. Beacon Academy, Team Ruby's dorm room. Blake thought that she might try to catch up on some more reading after the whole thing with Naruto yesterday. She hadn't taken the time to explain the things that Gurren had alluded to them, mostly because she didn't want to reveal either his or her former affiliation with the Fang. She didn't want that to be who she was anymore, but she knew she'd have to tell them sooner or later. Sleep had been scarce for her last night, though. The thing Naruto said, it heavily implied that he'd been at war with Vil for a time. Treaties weren't signed between peaceful parties. Blake, I think we need to talk. Looking up from the page she'd been staring at for easily over a quarter hour, the Ravenet saw her partner, her team's leader, and Weiss all standing before her bed. Ruby seemed apprehensive, nervously looking at the floor. Yang, the one who had talked, had a serious look on her face. She wasn't sure she'd even convinced the party girl could wear. Weiss, she had her arms crossed and a strange look in her eyes. The look was the only thing that signified she was any different to the usual. What is it? Her team was acting strange. They weren't strange in the way they usually were either. This was something different. Yang looked from Ruby to Weiss and then to Blake before taking out her scroll and handing it over to the cat faunus, closing her book and sitting up straighter, her legs over the edge of the bed. Blake played a video that Yang had yet to start, but it was obvious she was meant to watch. Immediately, she noticed Naruto and his group in the shot. The cameras appeared to be angled from above to capture their movements and expressions. However, there were several high-class looking people as well. Based on the context, she assumed this was the meeting with the nobles that Naruto was alluding to before. There was also a strange thing in front of Naruto's group. Looking closer, she realized that it was a human head and a stone pillar, some sort of barbaric face smile of a marble bust. Mount Glen is mine, he exclaimed very seriously. It was the kind of tone and stance that she expected out of Adam, not her little brother. It is under my protection and under my ownership. The occupants are my family, and those I allow in, Vel will rescind their claim to it and officially recognize Mount Glen as independent in any and all capabilities. This is my sole request, and we will not back down. If it is not your liking, then there will be no treaty. Any further deaths that occur, should that be the case, will be entirely on the hands of the Valiant nobility, leaderless as they are now. He looked at the nobles with a type of steely gaze that was all too present in so many White Fang. If not for those blue eyes, she might have assumed it was Yami rather than Naruto. Whether the nobles spoke in response, given the vantage was from behind the nobles, she couldn't really make out who it was. Then there is no reason to continue these negotiations. The video then cut to the familiar Lisa Lavender. Showing anything further than this would be far too graphic for our viewers. The Veil News Network apologizes for that, but assures you that any and all viewers that wish to see the full raw footage that will be released to the public by the VPD shortly. The next moments of the footage showcase the delegations from the so-called city-state of Mount Glen killing 22 police officers there to guard the negotiations before disappearing. It is likely that one of them has a semblance that allows for instantaneous transportation or illusions. As of yet, it is unknown if the delegates are still in Vale or not, but the Noble Council has seen fit to enact the state of martial law, which includes a 9 p.m. curfew for civilians. Please be in your homes by that time if you wish to not be mistaken for one of the terrorists, is the message from VPD's official police chief. The video came to an end, but Blake continued staring at the scroll. Just when the other three girls thought that she might have stopped working, Blake handed Yang her scroll without looking at her. Naruto is a really nice boy, I swear. What shocked the other girls, Ruby, most was the slight shaking in Blake's voice. There's been so many bad things he didn't deserve. All he wants is to protect them. Blake, what are you talking about? Ruby asked. Does this have to do with what that purple-haired woman said yesterday? We don't know anything about him, but it looks like he's a terrorist. Blake clenched her hands into fists as Ruby used that damned word. We're not terrorists. All three of them jumped back when Blake not only suddenly stood up, but shouted at them. Her eyes were wide open as she realized what she had done. Taking a deep breath, she looked away from them and grit her teeth. We just wanted to help people. You don't get it. That doctor. You don't understand what I saw. You can't possibly understand what they went through. Yang and Ruby and Weiss shared a look, trying to get a feel for the question for the quiet for the trying to get a feel for the quietest amongst their quartet. If I don't tell you though, then that would put him in danger, and that's not something I could live with. Blake walked over to the door and locked it. Then she shut and locked each window, closing the curtains. Finally, she faced her teammates with that stoic look in her eyes they were so used to. Perhaps there was some additional moisture they weren't used to, but they were wise enough not to mention it. Beacon Academy, headmaster's office. Ospen's clock tower was silent outside of the usual wiring of its gears, the reverberating tick-tock of the hands and the scribbling of pen on paper. It was as quiet as he could have hoped for, the kind of soft ambience that encouraged him to work more fluidly. This is why he chose this place for his office. There were little distractions, and work seemed to move alongside the gears. One stack slowly moved to the other side the same way time moved from past to future. A knock on his door interrupted the flow of time, halting his pen as his eyes moved up. "You may enter." His voice was only raised loudly enough for it to be heard, and not a decibel higher. The door swung open to reveal four of his huntsmen. "Excuse us, headmaster. Team Bard is here to give the report of our mission failure." Those words struck a chord within the man, causing him to set his pen on his desk completely. Fixing his glasses and taking a sip of his mug to calm his nerves, he motioned for Gary to continue. "We managed to establish communications with Naruto Uzumaki as instructed. However, there were complications from the very beginning. To start with, Monk Len was in conflict with some of the nobles of Vale. However, we sought to aid him in his fight. When we made that offer, Uzumaki seemed to change. He was so cheerful and full of light before, but then it's like our offer turned him into someone else. All the emotion drained from his voice, and he refused our offer. By the time we realized that he had left, we also realized that we hadn't actually delivered the package to him. With that in mind, we thought that we could offer our support anyways. Perhaps if we managed to show him we had his best intentions in mind, that we would be able to finish the mission. We had no such luck though, as he began shelling all areas around Monk Len shortly thereafter with some of the most destructive artillery that I've ever seen. To be fair, I've not been to the frontier that often, and I could produce far more devastating explosives with my semblance, but it was still quite spectacular. It was one of the most aesthetically pleasing pieces I've ever had the privilege of viewing with my own two eyes. Didera piped in with starstruck eyes and a happy voice. "Please ignore my cousin, headmaster. You know how he is. Anyways, we had decided we would split the team and counter the charges from four sides that Lord Uzumaki had made us privy to. My assumption had been he was trying to test us with that information, but it seems I was incorrect. When the shelling began, I rescinded the orders to ensure that my teammates were left as far from harm's reach as I could reasonably do, considering it was a veritable war zone. Shortly after, we retreated to a safe distance. We received a transmission to our scrolls. It was probably meant for the leadership of the other side, but we were likely just within range of it. On it, Lord Uzumaki explained that he knew where the nobles' camp was and that he was giving them a limited amount of time to gather their things and retreat. He also mentioned that he had surveillance on the area to such a degree that if they even so much as appeared as if they were going to launch another assault, he would bomb them with his air force. The King of Vale's head was also revealed over the video as a showcase that he was willing to kill even the nobles should they not heed his advice. I agree, I imagine. Though that last piece probably isn't a surprise, considering the coverage VNN has been given all day about how the negotiations of a peace treaty between Vale and Mount Glen went. Yes, I watched it. I did not like the way it was reported one bit. I realized that the crown controls the news, but it seemed far too skewed for even the nobles. Still, I suppose in one sense the inhabitants of Monkland might be considered terrorists. I simply do not think the nobles understand the force of nature they are trying to oppose. This entire matter is so far beyond their understanding, so far out of perspective for them, that I fear all of Vale will be thrown into discord for their decision. What do you mean, headmaster? Kurosuchi wondered. The Revenant seemed genuinely confused at that statement, considering the Lord of Monkland was a child that wasn't even old enough to apply for the very school Osmond was the headmaster of. Are you talking about that kid? Is he really so dangerous? Ospen took another sip of his coffee as he fought to find the proper words to convey his feelings to them. There are things in this world older than the Grim, older than humanity possibly. There are things in this world that would have the strongest huntsmen or hunters weep in despair should they feel its full force or lose their minds should they try to gaze upon it in its entirety. There are things that are unexplained. There are things that are unexplainable to the mortal mind. Naruto Uzumaki seems to be a child, but he has just one such thing. He paused a moment. There isn't really a proper means of conveyance. It is inhuman. Perhaps to describe the World Eater as a force of nature is not entirely inaccurate. However, even nature cowers before it. If the nobles cause Naruto Uzumaki to awaken that being within him and he unleashes it upon Bell, I am unsure there is much we could do. World Eater? I don't think I've heard of such a thing before, Gary noted. Is it some sort of grim? I've never heard of a grim living inside of a human, though, Ospen chuckled, but it was a hollow noise devoid of any joy. No, not a grim. I think even the grim would find themselves fearful of that thing. I am unsure what Naruto Uzumaki's exact relationship to the World Eater is, but it seems to be slumbering from what I can tell. Do not regard your mission as a failure. I will think upon our next step, but for now we have no choice but to let things in Mount Glen proceed or organically for our sake and that of Vale. White Fang HQ, Vale Branch, Adam Torres' office. Nissan! Adam hardly had a chance to look up from his desk and the paperwork atop it before a blonde blur crashed into him. After a moment taken to take in what had happened, he realized that Naruto had come to the base to visit him, along with two others, and had immediately latched onto him when he entered the room. No knocks or anything either. Adam was certain he'd locked that door as well. Ignoring that for the moment, Adam ruffled Naruto's spiky hair with a smile. Well, I certainly wasn't expecting a brat to barge in today. What brings you all the way out here, Lord of Mount Glen? Even though he was teasing him, Adam couldn't help but feel a bit of pride in using that title. He could still remember the desperate crybaby that he'd brought back from Orochimaru's lab, who never left Blake's side, and now Naruto was leading his own country and had defeated Vale in their attempt at taking it back from him. So you saw that newscast then? That lavender woman really didn't present me in the best light, but I expected as much out of Vale's state-run propaganda machine. I may have said Sasori and Kankuro to find a way to send out the raw footage to the people of Vale to really dig into the public support. Adam was surprised when Naruto let go of him and rose up, standing in front of his desk. That's not why we're here, though. I did want to visit you, Nissan, but I'm not here as your little brother. I'm here as the Lord of Mount Glen and protector of my people. I have a favor to ask you, not as my older brother, but as Captain Adam Taurus, leader of Vale's White Fang. This certainly piqued Adam's interest, so he dedicated what little of his focus wasn't already on his little brother to him as well. Very well, Lord of Mount Glen. What is it that you would ask of the White Fang? I assume that this has to do with our common enemy. Naruto nodded. If you've seen the newscast, then you already know the negotiations for a peace treaty with Vale fell apart. I thought that they'd be a little more pragmatic, considering the death of their monarch, but I suppose I lacked understanding in just how ambitious and influential the nobles were on their own. Because of that, we are still at war with Vale. I'll have to contact our people in Atlas, Mr. Vacuo as well, but I wanted to try and get your support first. Please don't misunderstand though, Nissan. I'm not asking you to lead the fight or to intervene in our conflict. This is the clan's fight, and one that we will see to the end. I just want to see if you'll agree to change the priority in some of your missions to things that would be mutually beneficial to both of us. I'd like to have some coordination between our forces so that we don't get in each other's way, and so that Vale is dealing with the full brunt of our capabilities at all times. Adam chuckled at the request. It certainly sounded like the kind of thing Yami would come up with, always putting his men into account even after this point. I can see the benefit to such an agreement. All right, I'll agree to it. I'd much rather coordinate my missions with Mount Glen than that detestable woman. Morale has been suffering with her around and going back to our roots rather than all of these meaningless dust heists that affect our fondest brethren as much as the human will certainly hope. I think Naruto beamed at his red-headed older brother. Thank you, Nissan. Kimimaru then coughed, causing the blonde to look at him, then back at Adam. Oh, right, there was something else that I wanted to tell you. I promised her I wouldn't, but this is too important. I found Blake. The smile on Adam's lips dropped as soon as he heard the name. I see. How long ago was this? It was blatantly obvious he was doing his best to keep control of his emotional state with Naruto in the room. It was right before the war started, so only a few weeks ago. She said she still was thinking about things and hadn't come to a decision on what she was going to do yet. She hasn't been to Mount Glen yet either. That's one reason I wanted to get my independence, so that there was a safe place where I could bring both of you. I want my family together again. Adam felt his anger begin to dissipate when his little brother said that. Don't worry, Naruto. We will be a family again. Thank you for telling me that you found her. Knowing she's still alive helps me a little. You don't have to tell me exactly where she's at. If you did, I'm not sure what I would end up doing, but I don't want you to send anyone near her by accident, he replied. Adam's eyes lit up with realization at why Naruto was telling him now. I know you wouldn't hurt Ni-chan, but there's a bunch of people in the fang that I'm not so sure about. As much as I like Eddie, I'm not sure even he would hold back unless one of us were with him. The captain of Vale's White Fang sighed as he thought about it. Okay, I'd rather not know, but your reasoning is sound. I will do my best to keep myself contained and not send a team to bring her back to us. It will be difficult, but I will put my faith in you just as you always put faith in me. Thank you, Nissan. The blonde then hesitated a moment before finally giving him the location. She's attending Beacon right now as a huntress in training. She was that close this whole time. We just raided a dust shop close to the campus not even 2 weeks ago. Okay, I won't send anyone near Beacon. You have my word. Even though there was a hollow pain in his chest, Adam thought that the smile Naruto wore probably alleviated it more than a little. End of chapter 27.